Welcome to the Rational Egoist. I'm your host, Michael Leibowitz. We've been doing a heck of a series on the philosophy's villains and heroes, and this is going to be our final episode in the series. And today, to finish it off with us, is the guy who's guided us through the whole journey, Professor Andrew Bernstein. Welcome back.
Oh, thank you, Michael. It's good to be back.
So today, we're going to be discussing my philosophical hero, and I believe yours, the late, great Ayn Rand. So before we get into the specific of her philosophy, I would just like to know, how old were you when you got involved with Objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand? What attracted you to it, and when did you become fully convinced in the veracity of her ideas?
Well, before I answer your question, Michael, let me point out, we're going to end the history of philosophy discussion today with Ayn Rand. Doesn't mean the history of philosophy ends. There will be great philosophers in the future. It's just that Ayn Rand is the latest of the great philosophers.
Yes, we're just ending our series. We're not ending philosophy here.
Right. And hopefully there'll be many great philophers to come. There's like many great writers and scientists and musicians and so on.
Yeah, well, I'm talking to one of the great philosophers now.
Yes, sure. Aristotle, Ayn Rand, Bernstein, absolutely.
The fourth A, didn't she? The three A's: Aristotle, Aquinas, and Ayn Rand, and Andrew Bernstein.
Well, thank you, Michael, but I don't belong in that exalted company. Nevertheless, I like to think I'm an effective, philosopher and certainly as a writer. But to answer your question, I had a high school teacher. This goes back to the late 1960s in Brooklyn, New York. I'll mention his name because he was a great guy, Jay Hyman. And he was a PE teacher. We went through the PE. He's teaching hygiene class, spring 1968. The Vietnam War is going on, riots and college campuses at Columbia and so forth. And Mr. Hyman, we went through the hygiene curriculum pretty quickly, and he spent a lot of the time discussing Ayn Rand's ideas and their application to contemporary, topical issues, such like as the Vietnam War. And it just made so much sense to me. It was so rational that summer I went, and I read all of Ayn Rand's novels. I read the Anthem, We the Living, The Fountainhead, and Atlas Shrugged. And I knew right away, these are brilliant novels. This is a philosophy that's not only true, but important. And I knew right away, at age 16, that these ideas were true and important, that could have a enormously, beneficial impact both in my life and the life of human society more broadly.
That is awesome.
And, I think I was always, a tacit objectivist. That is not only, believing that people should pursue their own happiness honestly, and by hard work and honest effort, that is I was an egoist or rational egoist, and a capitalist politically. This was the Cold War. I knew communism was evil. It's the era of the New Left. So many of my fellow students in high school were New Leftists. Ho Chi Minh. The NLF is going to win. I mean, they were. I hated communism, and for the right reasons. It was a totalitarian state. I hated it for the same reason I hated Nazism. It was a brutal totalitarian state. But at a deeper level, regarding some of the things we're going to discuss today, I think my cognitive methodology, the way my mind always worked, was always inductive. And that is, I was always looking for evidence, forming principles or conclusions based on the evidence, as much as a teenage kid could. And that's the way my mind worked. And so Ayn Rand's method, resonated with me at a very deep level as much as her content did. So this is and later on when I got to grad school and I had to study all these philosophers with philosophy professors who were intensely rationalistic, who regarded observational evidence as if would give them emphysema. It was the method in graduate school is what really boggled me. The way they use their mind is just, they were not inducing, they were not extracting principles from data, from observational evidence. They were up at this very high level of abstraction, dealing with the relationship between concepts, but rarely with the relationship between concepts and the observational evidence that they were based on. So Ayn Rand's method to me was the thing that really I think I loved right from this. I didn't even realize it at age 16, but looking back on it now, that's what I think I really love.
Okay. Well, Ayn Rand held that 5 areas were important to study in philosophy: metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, and aesthetics. Why don't we go through each one? Obviously, we can't, cover the whole everything she discussed in each area, but let's try to give the audience a good idea. So, metaphysics. What was the metaphysics of Ayn Rand?
I don't. It's funny. I can answer a number of those questions regarding aesthetics. I'm not an expert, even though I love art and I love the arts, and I'm a writer. I love literature more than anything. But regarding metaphysics, that is the nature of reality. That Ayn Rand's famous principle, existence exists, and that the relationship between in the relationship between existence and consciousness, the world comes first, the universe comes first, and consciousness is a secondary and subordinate development. And she called this the primacy of existence principle. That the world is what it is, facts are what they are, and we cannot change or alter them by a sheer mental act, by wishing or willing or so forth. And the critical metaphysical error she points out is what she calls the primacy of consciousness belief. And religion is the perfect example, where you start with, as I like to say, the super ghost of the universe. This disembodied consciousness is not a physical being, has no brain or nervous system or sense organs or anything. And then this disembodied consciousness from nothing, ex nihilo in the Latin, creates the entire universe. And then can intervene in the universe at any time to create, cause miracles, burning bushes to speak, and men live inside whales, and virgins give birth, and so on and so forth. This is a perfect example of the primacy of consciousness error in metaphysics, that existence or the universe itself depends upon consciousness in some form or other, rather than vice versa. That existence is what it is and is not malleable by any conscious effort, animal, human, or divine, if there was such a thing. The religious version of the primacy of consciousness is not the only one, but I think it's the clearest example.
So reality is what it is, right? For instance, if in cause and effect exists in reality. So if I smack my microphone, I'm going to knock my microphone off the table. The microphone is not going to knock my hand off of my arm. Every single time, cause and effect, the identity of the existence we're talking about, it's going to be the same. And the same thing is if a car hits a bicycle, things are what they are in reality. Independently of what I wish, what I hope, what I'd want it to be, things are what they are.
Yeah, exactly.
A is A, right?
Exactly. Yeah, A is A. A thing is what it is. Would that reality was malleable to my wishes, but it isn't. I remember once years ago in class, a student of mine gave me a perfect example of this, that she knew some guy in her life. I don't remember how old he was, but he was experiencing chest pains, and he was afraid that might indicate that he had a heart condition. And so instead of going to see a doctor or to a cardiologist, he convinced himself it was just indigestion. He treated it with over-the-counter medication, for heartburn, indigestion, and something like that. Condition that went on for several months, and eventually, without him getting medical intervention, and eventually he had this poor guy had a massive heart attack and died. Now that's a heartbreaking story. It's a tragic story, but it's an indication. The facts don't change just because we don't like them. Would that they did? Would that this is merely indigestion? I could treat it with over-the-counter medication. But the fact is that this was a heart condition, and nature was giving him warning. He had months. She said months of chest pains before he had a heart attack. He tried to wish away these very, very painful, very negative facts. The hero of Atlas Shrugged, I don't want to give away the name here, but the hero of Atlas Shrugged talks about, this Sarah calls it placing an I wish above and before, and it is. And that is a critical metaphysical error. And this example shows us in many instances, this can be a life and death error.
What you just said reminded me of two experiences I've had in my life. The first had to do with my own personal change. I was a psychological wreck. I mean, I was a criminal. I was angry. I was violent. I was insecure. I had all kinds of problems.
Well, I'm glad I met you now, Michael, not back then.
Me too. Maybe I would have been hanging out with our old friend Nanook. Anyway,
he had a lot more excuse for it.
He did. But the thing was, I had to acknowledge what was in order to rectify the situation, in order to fix myself. Had I denied it and said, no, I'm fine, it doesn't just go away. It needs to be acknowledged. And that's the only way that we can actually deal with things in reality. If I don't acknowledge that a car needs gasoline, it's going to stall. That's going to be it. It doesn't matter what I think or what I hope. That's the first thing. The second thing is
just something interrupt for a second.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Like say, hello, my name is Andrew Bernstein and I am an alcoholic. AA, I mean, I'm not, but I mean, AA is right that you have to have to acknowledge that this bitter truth, this painful truth before any remediation can work. You have to acknowledge the truth. You can't wish it away. You can't deny it. I mean, you can deny it, but
it doesn't do any good. Like the guy with the heart attack. He dies.
You'll suffer the consequences of your continuing alcoholism.
And I know that, you said it tongue in cheek, but the funny thing is people may think that it would be better if the world responded to our demands, but ultimately, if it responded to everyone's demands, there'd be no way to function. I used to watch this TV show Once Upon a Time, and it was a good show. I enjoyed watching it, and it had a lot of, it incorporated different fairy tales in it. So you had witches and genies and, all sorts of magic. And my friend, my cellmate, we used to watch it together, and he told me I could never live in that world. You could never function because you don't know what's going to happen. You're walking down the street, all of a sudden a tree turns into a pony, and, it runs across you. There's just no way to predict the future. There's no way to know anything because cause and effect and identity do not exist. And that is ultimately what a magical world looks like. It's not an appealing thing.
Yeah, that's the world that religion offers us in a way that God can intercede at any point,
right?
And create miracles. He can part the Red Sea. He can make burning bushes speak. He can contradict the laws of nature at will. And Ayn Rand's the key point is no consciousness can do that. No consciousness can abrogate the laws or violate the laws of nature as a sheer act of a consciousness. For instance, we're going to fly. We can't do it by wishing away the law of gravity or by wishing ourselves to fly by flapping our arms. We can't do it. Our arms aren't wings. We're not birds. But we can fly if we acknowledge the law of gravity exists, and then we develop engines for a plane that produce enough counter thrust to counteract the effects of gravity and get us off the ground. Denying gravity won't enable us to fly. But recognizing gravity and then dealing within its framework will enable us to fly. Nature to be commanded must be obeyed. Great point from Francis Bacon.
I was just going to ask you that. You ruined my big question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, come on. Okay. Rand is probably most famous for her political views and her ethical views, the virtuous selfishness.
Rand the philosopher, because she's very famous as a novelist too.
Yes. So, but to me, while very, very important those areas are, obviously, her greatest achievement is the epistemology, her theory of knowledge, of how we learn. That is a stupendous accomplishment on her part and has done wonders for me in my own life. Can you explain it to us?
Yeah. And I think we should start with the precondition or the anteroom to epistemology with sense perception.
Okay.
And then get into the world of concepts and ideas. Because we can go back to this all the way back to our early episodes when we discussed the sophists. and their claim about sense perception, namely that different species have different sensory organs. You remember, as we discussed, a human being looking at the table here with eyes. A bat has eyes, but they often use, an organic form of sonar, echolocation. And to us, given our eyes, the table appears as a rectangular brown, patch of, color patch. To the bat, it appears like as a certain kind of blip on the sonar screen. And so to the sophists, what that taught them, what they claimed then, is that the subjective nature of the sense organ dictates the form in which we experience reality. And so there's an appearance reality distinction. The table will appear differently to a human using eyes than it will to a bat using echolocation, to a Martian, if there was such a being who experienced the world with antenna, the table would appear as some kind of twitch of his antenna. And so sense perception is subjective. The sophists, it's dependent upon the nature of the sensory apparatus of the subject. And consequently, we can never know the objective world as it really is. And as we proceeded through the history of philosophy, we saw Kant develop this into a full-blown epistemological theory, that the mind, as well as the sense organs, has a certain nature and imposes its structure on incoming sense data. And the world that we experience is completely mind-created and subjective. And the objective world, the world independent of the mind, is unknowable. Now, Rand gives, I think, a brilliant repudiation of this. So we can think of sensory experience. I like to think of it for her philosophy as the sense experience is an identity interaction. Namely, the table is what it is. Our sense organs are what they are. And given the nature of both, the form in which we experience the table is necessitated by the laws of reality. The table must appear to us as we must experience it as a rectangular color patch. And the bat must experience it as a certain type of echolocate, certain type of blip on a sonar screen, given the nature of the object and the nature of the subject. The interaction is dictated, we could say today, by the laws of physics. There's no possibility of departure from reality. And I like, once we understand the law of identity, and you mentioned it before, a thing is what it is, or schematically, A is A. Then you recognize that the subject has a definite nature, the object has a definite nature, the outcome of the sense experience is stipulated or dictated then by the laws of reality. There's no possibility of departure from reality. Furthermore, the sophist Kantian claim is, that the nature of it is because the subject has certain cognitive apparatus, therefore it's disqualified from knowing reality as it is. No, that's just ridiculous. The form of cognition enables us, or the nature of our cognitive apparatus is a form of awareness. It doesn't invalidate the content of our awareness. The form of our awareness cannot invalidate the content of our awareness. What makes consciousness possible cannot invalidate the content of what we know. It's just it's a false claim. And I think the key to understanding is to really see the role of the law of identity in the sensory interaction.
So Rand said that there were three levels of knowledge: the sensory, the perceptual, and the conceptual. But she said that knowledge for us really begins at the perceptual level, because the sensations we're really not even aware of, because I think she defined perception as the automatic integration of the brain of existence. What exactly does that mean for the brain to automatically integrate the external world into perceptions?
We're getting into deep waters here. I'm not an expert in, but I think what that means is, we could contrast it. We discussed David Hume, a few episodes ago. Hume and what they're known as the radical empiricists, claim that what we perceive not entities, but qualities. Like here now green, not here now green car, but here now green. Here now cold, not here now cold wind, but no, here now cold. That is where we experience discrete, atomized, isolated sensations. And Rand says, in effect, who experiences here now green as opposed to a green object, or contrasted with a green object? That's not the way. I don't know. Maybe infants do. I don't know. What did William James call it? A world of experience,
the buzzing world of confusion.
Yeah,
right?
Buzzing, blooming, confusion.
Yeah.
Maybe infants do. I don't know. But adults, we perceive entities. And so in contrast to Hume, who says, that we experience just disintegrated or atomistic little sense data, like here now hard, not here now I'm touching the wall, here now hard wall, just hardness. Rand says, no, we experience entities, which certainly corresponds with my experience. Well, I don't remember ever experiencing green without, being a green object. And so that those sensations are automatically integrated by the brain of the higher animals into, and it looks to me, cats and lions and tigers and bears, I seem to experience entities, not discrete sensations, but I couldn't swear to that, so I don't know. But certainly as human beings, we do. So I think that's what Rand is saying.
So importantly, on the perceptual level, the integrations are automatic, but on the conceptual level, they're not. We actually have to work to integrate concepts. So explain to us her theory of concepts, because to me, this is just phenomenal.
Yeah. This is one of Ayn Rand's seminal contributions to the objectivity of concepts or universals, and then the objectivity of values, which is, those 2 points form the foundation of the name of our philosophy, of objectivism. But in contrast to again, we could contrast Ayn Rand with various great figures in the history of philosophy. Plato and Descartes, we discussed them, over the last few months, Michael, the idea of innate ideas, that God has implanted in us these basic ideas or concepts. Descartes says, Plato says the soul knows them from some sojourn in a prior life. Kant says there's this built-in network of concepts, which he calls categories, cognitive filters that enable us to structure sense data into the world that we experience. Concepts are, in one form or another, they're innate in our consciousness, according to these other influential philosophers. Rand says, in the Aristotelian tradition, Rand says, no, the concepts are formed inductively by a process of observation. And let's take a simple example that I have this little booklet I wrote on, it was an essay, a long essay in the Objective Standard that they went ahead and published as a booklet, also Heroes and Villains in Western Philosophy. And a simple example I use in the essay booklet and that I use in class is take, the example of cats. That one of the interesting about cats is how much they vary, in their size. You can have a little 10-pound house cat, and you could have a 1,200-pound liger, the offspring of a male lion and a female tiger, and yet they are enormously different in size. One's dangerous to rodents, and the other is dangerous to much larger animals, including us. But if you examine them, you notice that as a matter of observed fact, they share certain qualities in common, certain important qualities in common. For example, cats have claws, not nails, like dogs. And if you ever tormented a cat when you were a kid, the cat probably taught you that, it had claws. The claws are retractable. They can pull them in, they can sheath them, in peaceful moments, and they can unsheath them when they're jumping on a mouse or, or a rat or something. They're all cats. Their paws are padded. And so when a cat wants to move silently, it can move silently. They're hunters. The small cats hunt rodents, the big cats hunt antelopes, but they're hunters. They have all these characteristics in common where they differ in, and they're observed. This is observed data. We're not making this up. This is observational evidence showing us that the facts here, where they differ is in their size. The big cats are, I like to think of it, there's the mini cats and there's the maxi cats. The big cats are bigger, stronger, faster, eat more meat, and so on and so forth. And Ayn Rand pointed out, this is how we form concepts. We observe the similarities between and among members of a certain class. We don't know they're members of a certain class yet. We're in the act of forming that class, but we perceive or observe the shared similarities. Recognize that the differences between them are quantitative, a matter of how much, how many, a matter of scale, of differences in scale of size, and then we abstract away from the differences in measurement in order to form the concept or the classification based on the qualities that's shared in common that we observe.
So Rand was big on logic. And she defined logic as the art of non-contradictory identification. Right?
Nice. It's a nice, yeah.
And
nice
a concept, I believe, is the integration or two or more units according to observable similar characteristics, measurements omitted. So, for instance, Andrew Bernstein and Michael Leibowitz are both human beings. Andrew Bernstein has brown eyes. I have hazel eyes. You have a beard and mustache. I don't at the moment. You've got long hair. I don't. I guess that you're probably taller than I am because I'm only 5'8".
I mean, I was 6 foot. I think I shrunk a little bit.
But despite all that, we both fall into the concept of a human being because we have brains, we have ears, mouth, nose, arms, legs. Even though all these things differ in size and weight and shade, all measurements, nonetheless, we have them all, which is why we fit into the concept of human being.
Yeah, and let me give you an example that I always use in class because look, I have 25 students in a class. I look around, and like my intro to philosophy class last semester was a perfect example. There was a Korean kid. No, she's Vietnamese. I'm sorry, Margaret. Yeah, she was Vietnamese.
Oh my Lord.
yeah. Don't want to make those.
We're getting canceled.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for ethnic errors. Yeah, it was a Vietnamese kid. She was Asian. There's a number of Black American kids, number of white American kids. There was a couple of Latino kids. There was immigrants, from Dominican Republic. There was the one kid, her family immigrated from here from Vietnam. So there were male, a bunch of girls in class, bunch of boys, and so you had this wide diversity. Both genders, any number of different ethnic groups, different religions. It was really good in that regard because you don't often get a lot of Buddhists in any American group, but the Vietnamese kid, the family were Buddhist, and then there were a couple of Jewish kids, a number of all the Latino kids were Catholic. The Black kids were largely one Protestant denomination or another. So we had every not every religion, but many religions, many different ethnic groups, both genders, and yet, I pointed out, we're all human beings. I don't see any, lions or tigers or bears, in this room. We're all human beings. And what that means, of course, fundamentally, as Aristotle pointed out, is the capacity of rational consciousness. But those are essential characteristics. Human beings have gazillion characteristics, and we share them. Certain type of body, a certain type of sense organs, certain type of digestive system, the way our heart, works and our lungs work, and so on and so on, right down to having 10 shiny little, fingers and toes. So, yeah, there's a lot of diversity here, but we're all human beings, and the differences are measurable. The difference in skin color are measurable. The differences in the facial configuration between the configuration of the eyes relative to the cheekbones is it's a shape. It's geometrical, right? It's measurable. The differences in male and female, the differences in height, for example, and are measurable, and so on and so on and so forth. But we can abstract away from all the different measurements, and we have the essential characteristics of human beings.
Now, you alluded to Aristotle's observation about the distinguishing characteristic of human beings, the being a rational consciousness, which brings me actually to my next question. In that, Rand emphasized two very important things for me. That the vital role that definitions perform in forming concepts, and two, that a definition and a concept are not the same thing, that a concept is not its definition. So can you elaborate on that a little bit and explain, one, why are definitions so important, and how do they differ from the concept of which they define?
Sure. The definition, let's start with Ayn Rand's point about concepts more broadly. The concept refers, let's stay with the concept man, with human being. The concept refers to every human being and every characteristic of every human being, past, present, and future. The concept refers to millions of characteristics of human beings. But the definition we're looking for here, what fundamentally distinguishes this type of being? What is the fundamental characteristic that distinguishes this type of being from all other beings? You're right, Mike. This goes back to Aristotle, who taught us who was a great biologist, let us not forget, as well as a great, the seminal logician and a seminal biologist, who taught us to define by reference to genus and differentia. So, genus, species, differentia. So the genus is the broader class. We have a class of human beings, broad, big class. What's the broader class within which human beings reside? Now, there's many things. Human beings are a certain type of physical object. That may be a little broad. They're a certain type of organism that is a living being. That may be a little broad too, because it includes insects, plants, and stuff. Today we know germs. Animal. Animal would be, a very good genus, very effective. So human beings are a certain kind of animal, right? We're not plants or insects. We're certainly not inanimate matter. We're a certain kind of animal in the same category with lions and tigers and bears. Oh my! But then, so we're a species or a narrower class within the broader class of animal, within the genus of animal. But there's all these other animals in there too. So what distinguishes humans from all these other animals? Well, there's a lot of things. Man is the language-speaking animal. Man is the city-building animal. Man is the math-studying animal. Man is the
podcast animal.
Yeah, the podcast animal, the poetry-writing animal, and so on. But Aristotle's point, and Ayn Rand, takes this over from the great man, is there something that underlies all those differences and gives rise to them, makes them possible? And Aristotle's identification, of course, was, our rational consciousness, our rational faculty. That's what enables us to study math. The other animals can't. That's what enables us to write poetry. The other animals can't. That's what enables us to build cities. The other animals can't. That this is the foundation of it all. This is the key distinguishing characteristic that gives rise to these other distinguishing characteristics. So the concept, and this is Ayn Rand, the concept refers to every member of the class and every characteristic of every member of the class. But the definition refers only to the essentials, that which fundamentally differentiates this class from other classes.
Well, Rand called her philosophy objectivism, and objectivity refers, as you said earlier, to the relationship between the mind and reality, the mind and existence. And it's from the objective nature of concepts and the objective relation of the mind to reality that Rand comes up with her theory of ethics. Tell us about her theory of ethics. Also phenomenal in my view.
Yeah, this is good. Yes, this is what makes Ayn Rand, in my judgment, the greatest moral philosopher in history, even greater than Socrates or Aristotle. But objectivity is both a metaphysical and an epistemological concept. Objective in metaphysics means, the world exists independently of human consciousness, as we discussed. But I think that key meaning for objectivity is epistemological, and that is the orientation of the mind towards facts, towards reality, towards nature, not towards our own will, desire, aims, goals, aspirations, hopes, or whatever. But that we place, we always know to place the it is above and before any I wish. That a legitimate, proper, rational, life-promoting I wish is based on it. It is. And we discussed a good example before of, a man learning how to fly. Now we get to ethics, and again we could contrast Ayn Rand with David Hume. You remember when we discussed Hume, Hume said, "I can't discern any factual relationship between, any observable relationship between the facts of observation and any moral judgment." So I think the simple example I always like to use is, supposing we said working hard and honestly and productively and supporting yourself is good. Okay. So here comes Hume. And he's okay. Well, I can watch this guy working hard. He's sweating and he's whatever work he's doing. He's honest. I can see him making money. I can observe him going to the bank and making the deposit and putting some into savings and taking some and paying his bills, and I could discern all this. I could observe it, but where's the good? I'm looking for the good. I don't see it. I'm reaching out for it, but I can't touch it. I can't smell it. Where's the good in all this? There's no observable evidence that this is good or bad or any has any moral value. And so Hume concluded, there's no observable relationship between values and facts, between the facts of reality and any value judgment we make that X is good or X is bad. And so it's a subjective, ethics is a subjective phenomenon. We're expressing our likes and dislikes when we say. Bernstein likes hard work and honest effort. And so that's what it means when he calls it good. That's Hume. Now, Rand turns this whole thing on its head. And notice the way she formulates the question. She doesn't ask the question, is there some positive relationship between values and facts, or between facts and values? She asks the question, in effect, what is the fundamental fact of reality that gives rise to the phenomenon of value? What makes valuing possible in this world? What makes it necessary? This is what geniuses do. They kind of reformat the question. Once you pose the question in this way, it points you towards the answer. Once you ask the right question, it points you towards the answer, and that is, living beings have to reach certain goals in order to sustain their lives. They have to take action to reach certain goals. Plants have to dig their roots into the soil to gain chemical sustenance. They have to grow their leaves towards the sun. It gains sunlight for photosynthesis and so on. If they don't gain those things, they're going to die. And animals have to find the plants that they eat, or the carnivores have to find the herbivores that they eat and hunt them. And otherwise they're going to die. Living beings face this alternative of life and death that inanimate matter does not. The rock, for example, doesn't take any action to sustain its existence or to sustain its rock form. The rock form, or its continued existence is of no value to the rock. You can blow it to smithereens. It doesn't matter. It doesn't lose anything that it's taking actions to gain. But a living being does. And so good or evil refers to life and death, for living beings. And the good becomes, for any species, the good becomes that which will promote its life, and the bad or the harmful then is that which will harm or end its life. And that applies to human beings also. The good is that which is proper to the life of a rational being, Ayn Rand says, and the evil is that which undermines or harms or destroys the life of a rational being. But the nature of a living being and the factual requirements of its survival is the foundation of a proper ethics. And here Ayn Rand has given, even if somebody disagrees, I think they'd be mistaken, but they, rational people can disagree, right? Honest people can disagree rationally. If somebody, honest person, disagrees with Rand's theory here, okay, we could discuss it. But if they know the history of philosophy, they should at least say, wow, this is a brilliant contribution to the history of moral philosophy. This is a brilliantly original answer to the fundamental question of moral philosophy. What is the relationship between values and facts? So Ayn Rand shows that values are objective. They're grounded in the factual requirements of a living being's attempt to sustain its life.
Why does this result in egoism, or the virtue of selfishness, as she called it?
I think to explain that, I think we could just point out what I like to think of here is the metaphysics of individualism, and that is, you remember that we could contrast it with one of the old Star Trek series with the Borg. Do you remember the Borg?
You will be assimilated.
Yeah, resistance is futile. Yeah, you shall be assimilated. Yeah, they were collective being, and then they assimilated individuals into this, this vast, this like one, it was an individual in a way. It was one, gigantic collective being. That's a great science fiction premise, but that's not reality. Certainly not on Earth. Human beings are individuals. More broadly, as Aristotle pointed out a long time ago, the things that exist are particulars. I got a particular chair over here. One thing, not multiple layered entity or thing. One thing, one chair over there, one computer here, one booklet here. One pair of glasses here. Particulars are the building blocks of reality. In a way, it's much broader than living beings. And so we can come back to human beings. Who's going to live or die? Well, Joe Schmohawk is going to live or die. Mary Jones is going to live or die. Human beings are individuals, and if human life is the standard of moral value, as Ayn Rand says, that is that which promotes the life of a human being is the good, that which harms or destroys the life of a human being is the evil. When you recognize that human beings are individuals, that individuals need to sustain the values that his or her life depends on. And so this means, that metaphysical individualism translates into a ethical theory of egoism, and that is you need to promote your own life. The good is promoting your own life in accordance with the nature of human beings, which we will get to. But the good is promoting your own life, not sacrificing or surrendering the things that are most important to your life.
I find the concept of egoism to be incredibly empowering. Mm-hmm. The idea that my life is mine, it belongs to me. I have a right to act in my own interest, to do what's best for me, as long as I'm allowing others to do the same. And from that, it follows that I don't violate people's rights. We'll get to rights in a second, but it's just, but I need to follow a certain path in order to properly benefit myself. And Rand comes up with fundamental values, reason, purpose, and self-esteem as the three things that we pursue. But she also elucidates 6 virtues, which are the proper means by which to pursue them. We can't go through all the virtues, but just rationality is the primary virtue. Just tell us quickly, I shouldn't say quickly, I don't want to put too much pressure on it, but as succinctly as you can, the relationship between rationality and individual self-interest.
Sure. But before I do that, Michael, let me comment on just a verbal formulation here, because you said, as long as I allow others to do the same. And I think it's important to get the language right here. We don't have the moral authority to allow anybody, unless they're our child, to do this, that, or the other thing. I would always say, as long as I respect and protect, or certainly respect, as long as I respect and do not violate the rights of others to pursue their happiness. I think we need to be clear on the terminology for people to really get us. Because I've had students in class say to me, once, well, this guy says to me, he says, well, you're on your theory, all we got to do is we just let people do whatever they want, and everything's going to be good, right? Isn't that what you believe? I said, no, I never said that. Well, what did you say? I thought, I said, I don't think we should let people do anything. We don't have the moral authority to let other people, other adults do. We need to respect and protect their right to live their life as they will, so long as they don't, initiate force or fraud against others. You always put it in terms of rights. So then they, that's in the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. Yeah, okay. Then they start to, get a little more clearly. But anyhow, to get to your question, virtue is that which enables. It's a character state, or an activity or an activity that enables us to gain values, to gain the values that our lives require. So for a bird who who sustain their lives by flight, they got to swoop down on their prey. The flying, the capacity to fly is the virtue, and this is why mother birds train their fledglings to fly. This is the way birds survive. And for cats in the wild, they have to hunt, and mother cats train their cubs or their kittens, to hunt. That's the virtue, for them is that ability to do that. Well, for us, our life, and this is the theme of Atlas Shrugged, this is brilliantly dramatized, that all the values human life depend on need to be created by human beings. We need to grow food. We need to learn how to grow crops and so on. We need to learn how to cure diseases. We need to learn how to build houses, and so forth. We need to learn all kinds of things. Rational philosophy that recognizes the value of human life, logic that enables us to think clearly, without contradiction, mathematics, science, and so forth. All the values human life depend on are a product of the reasoning mind. Your food, we have to learn how it has to be grown. We need to learn how to grow it. The science of agricultural science, and agricultural technology enables us to grow enough food to feed billions of people. Similarly, have these horrible diseases like, the bubonic plague, cholera, and so on and so forth. We need to develop medical science, but that requires agricultural science, medical science requires thinking. Similarly, shelter. We need to build houses, keep us warm, in the winter and sheltered from the storm. And that requires knowledge of architecture and mathematics, which requires, reason. Any value we want to name. The arts, certainly. Some people think great artists like Shakespeare or Mozart or Beethoven, they're emoting. Well, there's a lot of feeling in these works, but you can't compose, Beethoven's Ninth or write King Lear on emotion. If you could get a bunch of dogs or cats to do it. They have emotions. Shakespeare's a genius. Beethoven's a genius. These are the great artworks are works of surpassing intellect, and so on with philosophy and science. And one last example, because I always give a lot of physical examples about food and medicine and shelter and everything. I'll ask my students, is world peace possible? Is it attainable? And invariably, they'll say no. They're a little pessimistic, and looking at history and current events, who can blame them? And I'll say, why not? And they'll answer me, well, people disagree on all kinds of things, and they always will. And I said, yeah, that's true. That's true. But what about this? We could disagree on everything under the sun. We could disagree on politics, religion, education, entertainment, the arts, sports, literature, medicine, anything you want to name. We could disagree on all of this stuff, international politics. We could disagree on all of this. So what about if we agreed on only one thing, reason, and that we negotiate out our differences? What about if we agree just on that one thing out of a million others? Would world peace then be possible? They're a little skeptical, but yeah, I suppose if people are, how are you going to get Hitler to reason? Well, yeah, it's a good question. You won't, but he doesn't agree is the point. If we did agree, we could resolve, interpersonal disputes, like marital disputes without the husband belting his wife, and international disputes without Putin sending his troops across the border into Ukraine. World peace is attainable, but it requires an honest commitment to rational negotiation by all parties. Reason in every possible way is responsible for every value human life depends on.
Well, rationality in Rand's system is the primary virtue. And she held that the initiation of force is the greatest of evils. Why? Why isn't it okay if I want to serve my own interest to rob Andrew Bernstein, to go get Nanook and his pals, come over and we just take Andrew Bernstein's stuff? Why is that evil to do?
Well, first of all, some of the viewers may not recognize Nanook, somebody we brought up, in a previous discussion as an example of a name of a caveman, right? Second of all, you really spend your time trying to rob somebody else. You get Nanook and his buddies to rob a philosopher. You're really not worth your time or effort.
Well, people that initiate force aren't known for their brightness.
Yeah, yes, it's true. But it was an old gangster movie. I think it was The Great Jimmy Cagney. The movie was, they never steal anything small. Why risk going to being incarcerated for $5,000? $5 million, and the prize is worth the game. But the initiation of force is since rationality or reason is mankind's survival instrument. So it enables us not only to survive but flourish on this earth. Grow crops and build cities and have flourishing farms and grow food and study medicine and treat diseases and then go to Mars and do all these make great works of art and make advances in scientific theory and philosophy, do all these great things and achieve human flourishing. It's all by a process of reasoning. Well, what is it that fundamentally invalidates this process? And it's the initiation of force. Hitler or Stalin or just an everyday criminal can't stick his hands inside my skull and rearrange my thinking. But as Leonard Peikoff, Ayn Rand's leading student, once put it nicely, he can make this thug dictator or just everyday criminal can make my thinking irrelevant to my action. And now I can no longer, he's got a gun to my head or a knife to my throat, or he chains me up and then enslaves me to work on the cotton fields. I can't act on my thing. I can't act on my rational conclusions. And consequently, mankind's survival instrument, his reason, is nullified in action. So, we might still be able to think, but we can't act on our thinking. So we can't take the steps necessary to create the values that life depends on. So the initiation of force is the fundamental means that annuls mankind's survival instrument in action. That's why it's evil.
Now we're prepared to enter the arena of politics. For Rand, politics, well, she believed that all political systems are ultimately ethical, and her political system is no different. So how does Rand's theory of ethical egoism translate or lead to her theory of politics? And what is her theory of politics?
Well, in a phrase, it's the principle of individual rights. And here we could go back to, to the great John Locke and to the American founders, who in effect were his students, and recognize that human beings have certain inalienable rights. Now, one of Rand's contributions of many is that these don't come from God, my imaginary friend. There is no God. They come from the requirements of human life on Earth, as we've been discussing. Human beings are individuals. Reason is our survival instrument, not only our instrument to survive, but to flourish. We need to be free to act on our rational judgment, on our rational conclusions. We need the principle of individual rights. We need the recognition that each individual, that your life belongs to you. That's really the essence of Ayn Rand's politics. Your life belongs to you. It does not belong to the state, does not belong to the church, does not belong to the family. As an adult, your life belongs to you. And we need, once we recognize that individuals, their right, their inalienable right based on man's nature and the requirements of our survival, that we need to be able to act on our rational judgment. We know, well, who or what can abrogate that? Well, other human beings, and by the initiation of force. And so we need an institution to protect us from bad guys, from foreign invaders, from everyday criminals, from indigenous dictators. And here's where Locke and the American founders were so brilliant. We need limited government. We need limited constitutional government. We need a constitutional republic with a written constitution with a Bill of Rights specifying the rights of the citizens of the country as the legal document of the land, and the government then, what morally legitimizes the government is that it protects those rights. And James Madison did a great job, in the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights, First Amendment protects freedom of religion, it protects freedom of speech, and the Second Amendment protects the right of honest people to own guns, to be able to protect themselves, and and so on and so forth. And what morally legitimizes any government is that it recognizes, respects, and protects the inalienable right of individuals to their own lives. And George Washington put it very nicely. Government, like fire, is a dangerous servant. It's a servant, not a master. Its job is to protect our rights. And it's a dangerous one because when it has the power to protect our rights, it might well grow to the point where it has the power to violate those rights. So you have to keep the government under there's that thin line to walk. While you empower the government to protect individual rights against all kinds of bad guys, you also have to make sure that it's limited to that function, and it doesn't assume the power to violate rights. But that's the moral principle here that I think has to be recognized. Government is a servant, and its function, its proper function, its necessary function, and its glorious function when it does it properly is to protect individual rights.
The way that I sort of formulate it to myself is that in order for me to thrive, in order for any human being to thrive, requires freedom. The freedom to think and the freedom to implement one's thinking into action. And that is why rights are necessary, because like you said earlier, under the use of force, the mind can't operate under force. You can't force a mind. But also it's that the way that I look at the right to life is that life is the standard of morality. Human life is the standard of morality, rather. So I must have the right to, because right is a moral claim. It's a moral claim to something. And it seems obvious to me that I must have a moral claim to that which makes morality possible, which is my own life. And that's how I formulate it. And so many, like the concept of rights is so absent from political discourse. And it just seems to be getting worse and worse. And I don't know if that's just my perception of it, but it seems to be degenerating further and further away from rights, from principles, from ideas, and just into basically tribal wars between parties, where each party just levels accusations at the other party. And these allegations are probably true because they're not exactly the most wholesome of bunch, neither Republicans or Democrats. Speaking of politicians, not, the average citizens. Do you think there's any way out of that so we can get back to at least discussing the concept of individual rights?
In theory, yes. And I don't want to sound completely pessimistic. I published a book last year on the school system. Why Johnny still can't read or write or understand math and what we could do about it. So, the what we can do about it part is applicable here. Right now, the school system is hopeless. I think for the most part, the teachers' colleges, the school system, the humanities divisions of our universities disseminate poison. It's all post-Kantian. So much of it is post-Kantian, Hegel, Marx, postmodernists, all the villains we discussed on the last episode. But parent power can change it. Pull the kids out of the schools, actually use phonics to teach reading, teach American history, real American history, not Marxist propaganda. Teach the kids to think, teach the kids the principles the country was founded on. And yes, I think in time, it is possible. We need an educational revolution in this country is what we need. The function of education is cognitive. Teach the kids to think, just like, mother birds have to teach their fledglings to fly. Mother and fathers need to teach their children how to think. They need to have basic thinking skills of the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. They need history critically, American history, to show the flaws in America: slavery, massive initiation of force against innocent people, the greatness of America, the principle of individual rights that protected the mind of so many innovators. Look at what happens once you protect the mind. You have Edison and the Wright brothers and Alexander Graham Bell and all these great writers, and Mark Twain and then Nathaniel Hawthorne and Hemingway and later on Ayn Rand and all these great scientists and these inventions, and Elon Musk says we're going to be on Mars in 30 years or so. All these great things. Once you liberate the mind, once you protect the freedom of man's mind, you have all this outpouring of advances in any field imaginable, from A to Z, from architecture to zoology and anything in between. And then show that the contrast to individual rights in America. Show what it's like under the Nazis. Show what it's like under the communists. Show what it's like under the jihadists. And the kids can learn growing up. They know how to read, they know how to write, they know basic mathematical calculation, they know history, both of America and its enemies, and they're much more aware of the values of the mind and of freedom and of individual rights. But it's going to take it is possible. It's going to take an educational revolution.
I agree. And I think with Rand's philosophy as a guide, we can achieve it, but it's certainly going to be difficult to accomplish.
Yeah, it's like the labors of Hercules, it's like cleaning the Kantian stables here of in the field of education. It's an enormous task, but Rand is like Hercules, an intellectual Hercules, and she might very well inspire that kind of educational revolution.
Well, we won't be able to get into art because I have to confess that that's the area of her philosophy that I know least about as well. I know that she's a romantic realist, that she believes in.
But Michael, we can do another episode and just focus on Ayn Rand's aesthetics.
Okay,
we could both. I need to bone up on it myself. Go back through the Romantic Manifesto.
Okay, people, you heard it. I have a commitment from Professor Bernstein that we are going to do an episode on Ayn Rand's aesthetics. But before I let you go from this episode, I should point out, neglect on my part to not have already delved into it, that Rand's philosophy of individual rights and her political theory that the proper purpose of government is to protect those rights ultimately translates into the economics of capitalism, which she fought for and advocated with an absolute vigor that was superhuman. Just tell us, what is capitalism and why did she advocate for it so strongly?
Well, she advocated for true capitalism, like a laissez-faire, and that is the principle, the system of individual rights, the system that recognizes, upholds, and protects, the right of an individual to his own life, to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The system that properly abolishes the initiation of force across the board. Not only has laws against, murder, rape, assault, and all these horrible crimes, and against fraud, but where the Constitution delimits the power of the government to whether it's to spy on people or to take, to tax them, or to take their land via eminent domain, or, spy on people, I'm talking about what the kind of spying that, what's his name, demonstrated that the national security Snowden, yeah, thank you, Edward Snowden showed, that is the government spying on people, innocent people. I think the government can, when the justice system has evidence somebody's perpetrating a crime or contemplating a crime, and they go to the judge and they get a court order, and that enables them to surveil the individuals. But to spy on innocent, Snowden pointed out the government spying on innocent individuals. The capitalism is the system that properly abrogates or completely removes makes illegal the government initiation of force against its citizens, and of course, in other words, the government protects us from everyday criminals, and the Constitution, the Bill of Rights protect us from the government. This is the system of the capitalism is the system of individual rights. Protects the rights of every individual to his or her own life, and like I said before, once you institute capitalism, even in a small degree, you see this outpouring of entrepreneurship and innovation and advances. When you have capitalism across the board, as the United States almost did in the late 19th century, especially in the northern states, where there were no Jim Crow laws violating the rights of Black American citizens, you saw this tremendous outpouring of advances in any field you want to mention. And in my book, The Capitalist Manifesto, I dubbed this the inventive period. I took it upon myself to change the name. It's not the Gilded Age. It's the inventive period. It is the outpouring of advances in every field made possible by protecting individual rights, which means protecting the free-thinking human mind. So, capitalism is the system of individual rights. And because it protects each individual's right to use his or her own mind, as long as he sees fit, as long as it doesn't initiate force or fraud against others. Because of this, it's the system of human flourishing. Every possible advance in any field you want to name happens, occurs under the capitalist system.
You stole my thunder again. That's how I was going to sum up everything you said. I was going to say it's the system that allows individual humans to thrive, but I can't put it as well as you did. It's the system of human flourishing. Yes, it is. Well, we're not done, I guess, with our series, because we still got to do the aesthetics of Ayn Rand. But Professor Bernstein, is there anything you'd like to add that we didn't get to talk about today?
Well, I would just like, if can I do some shameless self-promotion?
I hope you do.
My new novel, Reckoning, is out. It just came out, available from Amazon. Reckoning: Race War Comes to America. I've long feared, Michael, that you were talking about both sides in politics. I've long feared that racial antagonisms, and most of it, I think, comes from the left today. They hate white people, and at the same time, they institute policies, their welfare state policies and their school system policies and their minimum wage law policies that are responsible for this astronomical crime rate in the Black American community, where you have thousands and thousands of murder victims every year killed overwhelmingly not by the cops, but by gangbangers, by thugs. They don't care. Leftists just don't care about that. As long as they win the war to destroy capitalism and impose socialism or communism, thousands and thousands and thousands of Black murder victims are just collateral damage to them. But be that as it may, I was long feared that racial antagonism push America into race war. And so, I worked on this book for 10 years. Gone through countless, rewrites. And it's a warning to everybody. It's about race war. It's not for the faint of heart. But for literature lovers, this is a hell of a story with a powerful theme of colorblind individualism versus racism in any form. Literarily, I think this is a terrific novel. Of the 10 books I published, I think this is literarily the best. So I want to promote Reckoning, Race War Comes to America, available from Amazon as a paperback or in Kindle. So thank you for that, Michael.
Well, hopefully we can do an entire episode just on that book as well. I'd love to do it, to pick your brain about it.
Yeah, I love to, if you get it in Kindle or paperback and read it, see what you think.
All right. Will do. You put me on the spot. I'll have to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So where can people find you?
Well, my website is andrewbernstein.net. My Facebook page, my social media, formats, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. And again, my website is andrewbernstein.net.
All right. Great. All right. For now, this is the Rational Egoist signing out. I'm Michael Leibowitz. Remember, let me hear what you think. I'd love to know. And if it's good, I'll respond. Even if it's not, I might respond. Who knows? Thank you very much. Till next time.